So this is just a quick overview of the IBIS T5000 hardware and maintenance. So as all of you by now have seen, this is the benchtop version of the T5000. It has a lot of components on it. One that's not shown, which is an optional component, is a junior compressor. That's because the mass spec does need nitrogen or compressed air to run, and the heat sealers need it. So if you don't have, like we do, we have a nitrogen line in throughout a whole building. You can get a compressor as an optional thing. So this is a close-up of the cleanup module, and what you want to be concerned about this module is that if you ever see these cleanup wash stations over flooding, that means your wastewater station is full and you need to empty it, and you will get back up into here. You want to make sure when it's placing your plates that it's placing them correctly, because if it's not putting them in the right spots, it won't transfer your samples correctly. We had a few plates a while back where row H was empty, and that's because the plate was shifted and it was putting row H in row G and so on, so you miss row A and then you lose your samples. This is a close-up of the Autosampler that is used to inject the samples into the mass spec. As you're starting up the instrument, you want to check that this syringe is aspirating. And also again here at your injection valve that you see no pooling at the injection site. That's indicative of a plug. And if this is not aspirating, it also probably means you have a plug and you've blown your syringe. Those are rare occurrences, but there's things you want to just check to make sure when you're running that sample that you only have one shot, that everything's working as best as it can be. As we'll see in a moment when we go back over to the lab, before startup, you got to make sure that your cleanup reagent bottles are full enough to do your run, that you have enough system water to do your run, because this uses system water to aspirate your cleanup reagents, and that your empty bottles are empty. For each plate, it takes approximately 50 mils of each cleanup reagent and 150 mils of system liquid. So each plate generates about 300 mils of waste, and that is in the range of 30% methanol, so you have to dispose of that as a hazardous waste. You can't just dump it down the sink. For CR3, the amount used is split between two bottles, so you use about 30 mils in the cleanup stage and maybe 20 mils in the spray stage. So on a daily basis, you also want to check that your Autosample syringes are not bent. This is most critical for the cleanup station where you have the 8 stations. And the syringes that are powering all of this are called Cavro. You want to check those to make sure they're not leaking. On a monthly, we recommend performing a flush of the system fluidics, and we recommend you do that with 100% methanol, followed by water, followed by the appropriate reagent for the bottle. And that also ensures that you get fresh reagents and you'll replace those. On some cages, you'll see that your cleanup syringe and your injection syringe will get sort of a gunky buildup on them. We would recommend wiping those with 70% IPA as necessary to keep those clean and moving freely. All of the systems have a heat sealer where that is critical most for the elution plate, heat sealing it so you don't get evaporation during the run. You want to check that this has not run out. We've occasionally started a 15-plate run, and on plate 3, we're out of heat sealer. And it's easy to forget because it does about 2,000 plates, 1,500 plates, so you'll be hunky-dory for a long time, and then you'll hit critical mass. Yearly, the IBIS service group will do a PM visit, which includes calibration of your TOF, so an actual calibration of the TOF as opposed to the internal calibration on each sample. Oops. And that really requires that you then run some plates to check the sensitivity and check the calibration. Since there are no direct NIST traceable mass spec calibrants, you have to do your NIST traceable calibration of the system through a series of links. And the way to do that is to run the SRM 2392-1, which is a NIST traceable control for MITO. And if you run this sample at the same time as any positive controls that you're using on a daily basis, then you can demonstrate that your instrument and those samples are calibrated in this traceable way. When you first start up the instrument and start up the control software, there's a splash screen that comes up. This one actually is a little bit outdated, but the thing to notice is there's a whole bunch of things that goes and checks and make sure are functioning properly, turned on correctly, connected correctly, and receiving signals. So if you see red things that say errors, well, that's a problem. You can't continue on. And it'll tell you, you know, can't proceed, or I'm going to exit. I have too many problems. The easiest thing is just go and check that someone hasn't turned off the power, that your cables are connected, and ether connections, and if all else fails, you call the service group and they'll talk you through it and help you, or come out and fix it. Occasionally you will get an errors as it is running. One of the most common errors is if you say you're going to do a 15-plate run, but you only have 3 plates at the beginning, it'll go and look for plate 4 at the appropriate time, and if you haven't put it on, it'll send you an error. In that case, you just put it on in the position and hit retry. Occasionally, it will drop a plate, and you'll have to move it to the next stage, and that's when you want to use ignore to skip that step and go on to the next step. This table lists some common errors. Barcode read failure, and we now have a method for you to enter in the barcode so you can get around that. If your PCR plate has not been registered, it'll have what is called the kit status, and it won't accept that plate. It must know that the plate is registered because it uses the information from the database to run the plate and knows which samples to do. You'll have to register the plate before proceeding. If you've forgotten to put fresh mag bead and elution plates, it'll catch that because it'll check the barcodes and check the status. You'll have to just put new plates. A Z-axis crash on the leaps means it hasn't found home and it's gotten hit by something. You just sort of need to push it past home, hit retry, it'll home itself and continue on. The sealer foil error, you go ahead and reload it. If you see error in the tubing or syringes before startup, you want to stop and prime because you won't get a very good cleanup because it won't accurately pipette the cleanup reagents. If the pump box syringes, which are the Cavaros, are leaking, they need to be replaced. You can do that by yourself, or IBIS service will come out and do it. And the one that sometimes we forget about, if your reservoir is overflowing, that means your system waste needs to be empty. So that's sort of a brief overview of the daily maintenance and yearly and monthly maintenance of the T5000. So there's really not that much, and most of it's common sense.